did it on his own, which I'm guilty of myself. So, but what started happening is ball position started to move, and then it just became a can of worms. Okay, so anyway, so we're back up at P4. I'm going to try to stay off these little tangents. And so from P4, this is the magic thing. Now I have some favorites out there. Like I love Hideki, his transition, right? And by the way, Hideki, his golf coach, is almost YouTube. Him and James Hahn. You know, they just go all day long. They're watching YouTube. So be careful and be excited to what you put on YouTube because these guys are going to watch it. Okay, so you watch Hideki or Dustin and all these guys. Okay, and I'm not going to go into too much of the wrist angle relationship, all that stuff. I'm going to leave the smart people up for that. So I'm just going to tell you where and what to measure. Okay, so at position 5, the big deal, you have some options here. Okay, so one way to do it is try to stay back longer on the right side. So who are some players that do that? Rory, right? One of my favorites. Okay. So he goes, okay, now when that happens, what happens to the relationship between the pelvis and the upper body? Keep doing that. Thunder. You maintain that left side bend a little bit longer, okay? And when that occurs, I'm not going to hit my chest, okay? This doesn't go back, okay? Now, some patterns, you would actually go this way. You'd actually transfer it forward, but you have to keep the left side bend, okay? That's more like for Robert's pattern. So as Robert changes direction, so Mac would call it a COG shift. He'd be like, hey, 1 o'clock in the morning, got to come over to my room. I have my Mac out. I'm going to show you a bunch of COG shifts. I'm like, okay, we'll go look at COG shifts. And literally, it was an hour of watching players go like that. Okay? None of them are going that way. Okay? But Rory, who's interestingly enough, hits it really far, right? Has a pattern when he hits it, high draw. He can cut it, but he has a really nice high draw pattern. So when he makes his transition, it goes like that. Okay, then when his thrust pattern, I call it thrust pattern. When his thrust pattern kicks, it goes there. So it's not going there right off the get-go. Okay? So I get a lot of guys that come and they're like, damn, I'm doing this. I'm like, what is that? I say, well, I'm early extending or whatever you want to call it. Okay, well, there's a relationship factor that's going on. So that would be your attempt of shallow. And all of us are golf coaches, so we all know what that is. So if I was Rory McIlroy, okay, and it's not in vogue to say this, we're trying to make it in vogue, but Rory is the most stuck player there is, right? For what people would look at. If they looked at him at P6, don't worry, I'll get to P5. If he was at P6, his club head's down here, and his body's like this, right? And then he extends. Now he's pre-rotated, sweet spot the furthest back, all this stuff, and then he extends, okay? So you get the high handicapper who has none of that. It's the furthest out, it's the most open, okay? It's like all the guys that Martin fixed, right? He had that one guy who's way out here. So all this is here, and it's going this way. So it's the opposite of Rory McIlroy. But the problem is when we try to get like Rory, or when people see that, they do it and they still cite the early side. Okay, I had one player who did that and couldn't gain any speed. And as soon as he did, he gained 3 miles per hour, like this. It took him a month to do it, 3 miles per hour right off the get-go. So he went from the 112 to the 116 range, right? And he was a good player. Launch conditions also improved. So if you have those two conditions that improve, I think things are going to be pretty good. And keep the pattern. Okay? So, because that's going to be a future topic that I'm going to talk about. So when I'm up at P5, I have options here. I have a left arm condition. Okay, I'll start with that. So I can have a left arm that's inside a few degrees. It could be X, it could be 20. Left arm that's on the baseline, or I have one that's outside. And I have shaft condition. Is it flat? Is it standing up? I have wrist condition, flexion to extension. I have radial condition. So Charles Howell was like this. He still is. Not around me, he's not. Okay? It's more this way. Okay? So when we look at all these things, those things have matchups. So Chris Como's a good friend, and the first thing that he said, and he's a good teacher, he's taught for a long time. He's kind of from my neck of the woods. And you know, he looks only for matchups when it comes to the mechanics. He wants to see, does that coincide with that? If it doesn't, then we need to figure out a way to make it happen like that. So when I look at P5, I want to see all these different slides of these tour players. And you'll see, like Jason Day and Hideki look very similar. Legs have reflexed, right? You have the right pelvic tilt. It's not like straightening legs and going this way. They regain some forward bend. So your forward bend is going back into flexion, right? So we all know that. We all look for that. And then how their shoulder plane works. Okay? Does it flatten out? Does it maintain itself? Okay? So when all that occurs, what are some of the things that we have? We have this rotation. By the way, this is a workout right here. I didn't show you guys. Right? So you have a weight system, band system, preferably band system because it's mobile, and then you go like that. So there's my left side bend going back into P5. Okay? So after P5, we go to P6. Now P6 is fun. So my job when a few years ago, when Mac would have these clips, right, and he'd give me these pictures, and I still have the pictures in this thing. And I don't travel with it because I've lost like a couple tapes. And I'm kind of bummed about it. But we had like Billy Casper. We were talking about that. We had Trevino. We had Arnold Palmer, Hogan, Snead. All these different slides all the way through of P6. And he goes, okay, well, Dana, at P6 here, what do you see? P6 here, what do you see? P6 here, what do you see? Like, okay, well, so Billy Casper had more like a linear component in there. Okay? Now, Casper was stronger grip, aim left, had a lot more linear, okay? And was very similar to Trevino, but totally different ball flights. Okay? And what were the reasons for that? Well, there was different conditions in setup, attachment, impact location, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so when I look at P6, we got to really know what's going on. So at position 6, I could have, like you see with Daniel, the sweet spot outside the hands, face somewhat square to the forward bend, right? And the sweet spot's out here, and it's going down and across. Okay? Now, is it optimal? No, but he swings fast enough to support it, as does Rock. So if I'm swinging 109, I'm not going to have a player there. Okay? So when they get to the Champions Tour level, they better change their pattern. Okay, that's more my opinion. But they would have to go more towards where Grant is, where the sweet spot's in more. So at P6, we could have that sweet spot in, and we can have it down, down. So what's controlling that? Okay, some people go, well, right arm doesn't matter. Well, it does. Okay, left wrist matters, right arm matters, ulnar matters. Right, so this is your radial condition, ulnar condition. So when I get to P6, I could have the clubs outside the hands. I could also have it down and below the hands, and I can have it ulnar deviated. So that lowers the head. Okay, some of you know this we've talked about this before. So what does that affect? What's a really important thing that actually affects outside of the path? There's a magic thing that it affects. Do you want to take a swing at that?
What's the question?
Except for Joe, because he knows. No, so when you ulnar deviate the head down, behind with the sweet spot, what does that affect at the moment of impact?
Impact.
Yeah. What does it affect?
Impact.
At impact, what does it? Somebody said it's angle. Yes, angle of attack, correct. So if I have the sweet spot up, right, at P6, relative to here, the potential is to hit up on the golf ball more or less down. Okay? So that's very interesting for the guys who launch it. Okay, so some guys will, and that's without changing my upper body location. So I could still have this somewhat forward and have this here and hit 6 up on it, no problem, and not change my wrist conditions. Okay? So whether or not I was like this, and then I have to back out to try to do it, and then I have a rate of closure issue, which is when we get to P7. So from P6 to P7, all these things being equal, okay, we have, I try to look for secondary tilt, okay, which is basically right side bend on the 2D stuff, okay? And when we look at this, we can, there's some players that are more narrow relative to wide. So you have the Strickers relative to like Lucas Glover, okay? So when they come into impact, and you guys would know the difference, like Stricker looks really wide, right? And then Lucas Glover is very narrow. They all tend to try to get back to the same hitting location. Obviously different launch conditions. So when you have a player who is like a Lucas Glover at the impact zone, okay, you're going to see more and more of this kind of kick in. And what was interesting is when I was younger, I had a lot of that. And I didn't really realize, a lot of it was trained, because I remember standing up on a tee box, and there was OB right, and then there was water left. And I should have just like put the cover on top of the bag, put it over my shoulder, and walked in. But there's this thing called perseverance. And so it was talking in my ear. And so I'm standing up on the tee box, and I should have left the Sharpie on the ground too, because it was reload season. And again, when I hit this shot, and it goes way out, basically OB. And I'm like, okay, great. So I did everything they told me to do. They, being Golf Digest or Golf Magazine, teachers, wherever they're in there. And I looked at all the pictures, saw Nick Price's swing, saw Faldo, saw all these guys. And I went into the mirror and I did this stuff. This is all like 92, right? It's all before the Mac stuff. And the ball just went over there. It should never do that. It should never happen. I'm not going to go into why I should, but it just should not happen. So anyway, reload. I aimed so far over there and sliced it back to the middle of the fairway, and then